In just under 2 minutes, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett dismantled the son of a billionaire live on national television. It wasn't just a debate. It was a reckoning, an electric shift in power dynamics broadcast to over 4 million Americans from a packed auditorium. A black woman who had once juggled 3 jobs to put herself through law school now stood, calm and rooted, across from Barron Trump, the heir to a gilded name. What began as a smug attempt to humiliate her unraveled into a moment that forced the nation to ask, what does leadership really look like? Is it inherited or earned? This retelling may be dramatized, but the feelings, the power imbalance, and the silent dismissals faced by women of color are very real. And as this story unfolds, remember, sometimes fiction reveals truth more loudly than fact. The lights in the auditorium dimmed, softly, enough for the sea of faces to blur into a unified hush. The silence wasn't truly silent. It buzzed with quiet anticipation. The rustle of paper, the click of pens, the warm hum of broadcasting equipment, the flicker of lenses tightening their focus. A sense of something monumental gripped the air. Nobody could name it, everybody could feel it. A bold banner stretched above the stage. The future of ethics in American politics, a national forum. So sterile, it nearly masked the real weight of what was about to happen. Rows of students filled the front, phones raised, notepads open. Journalists and analysts clustered in the middle. And at the very back, the people who had waited years for someone to say out loud what they had only whispered in private. Teachers, veterans, former public defenders, retired civil rights attorneys. Whispers moved through the crowd about her, Jasmine Crockett. A name, until recently, known only to committee hearings and C-SPAN watchers. But tonight, she was center stage. The Congresswoman from Texas. A public defender turned politician. A woman who hadn't inherited her seat, but had fought, tooth and nail, for every inch of it. And across from her, Barron Trump. 19. The political debut of a legacy. His handlers had promised a rebrand, a new conservative voice. The plan? Let Barron dominate the stage and walk out reborn as a political force. Politics rarely favors those who underestimate lived experience. Above the stage, lights flickered on, casting a golden glow on the 2 podiums. One extravagant, gilded with gold trim. The other, simple, unadorned. An accident? Or a message? Off camera, moderator Lyle Hartman, known for his composed neutrality, cleared his throat. "We go live in 30 seconds, someone whispered in an earpiece. Behind the curtain, Jasmine stood still. Calm, focused. A ribbon, old, frayed, sat in her coat pocket. It had once been tied around her mother's wrist during chemo. A reminder of who she fought for. In the opposite wing, Barron adjusted his tie for the 3rd time. His team handed him a final note card. Buzzwords underlined: law and order, fiscal responsibility, identity politics. He didn't read it. He smiled. He liked the cameras. The clock ticked. 10. 9. The screen behind the stage lit up. The logo shone. The crowd leaned forward. Some expected sparks. Others braced for failure. In the crowd, a mother of 3 whispered to her daughter, "This is the one you'll remember." She didn't know why she said it. But she was right. "Ladies and gentlemen," came Hartman's voice, smooth and ceremonial, "please welcome Mr. Barron Trump." He walked with the stride of a spotlight child. Navy suit tailored, hair styled, grin calibrated. The applause was light, safe. The cameras loved him. His 2 aides melted into the shadows. Barron approached the gold-trimmed podium. He adjusted the mic, gave the moderator a nod. The image was clear, poised, curated, heir to an empire. Hartman continued. "Mr. Trump joins us tonight to discuss the ethics of tomorrow's leadership." The room stilled. Joining him, from the 30th Congressional District of Texas, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. No handlers, no entourage. Jasmine walked out alone. Slate blazer, deep blue blouse, modest earrings, no makeup illusion, no performative flourish, just her. She didn't scan the crowd. Didn't smile for the cameras. Her eyes stayed forward, focused. This wasn't a performance. This was another step in a long journey paved with unpaid bills and impossible odds. She reached the plain podium and nodded once to Hartman. No more, no less. The applause was quiet, but different. Respectful, intentional. A few stood silently, then sat again, like witnesses to something unspoken. Barron turned toward her with a practiced grin, hand extended. "Congresswoman." Jasmine accepted it, firmly, briefly. "Mr. Trump." Her tone was neutral. Her eyes were not. For a moment, the space between them held something almost visible, a shift. Two Americas meeting at a single mic. They faced forward. The title screen faded. The moderator shuffled his notes. No word had yet been spoken. But everyone felt it. This wouldn't be a debate. It would be a reckoning. The first question came from the moderator, measured, diplomatic. "Let's begin simply. In your view, what does ethical leadership look like in today's America?" A neutral opener, non-controversial, designed to set the tone. Barron Trump didn't want neutral. He smiled, not out of friendliness but calculation. A micro-expression engineered in the mirror of political mentorship. "Before we talk about what leadership should look like, maybe we should ask what it currently does. Because I find it fascinating, truly, how someone goes from a hair salon chair to the House floor." "Congresswoman Crockett, how does that happen?" No change in tone, no raised voice, just calm contempt. The jab wasn't in the words, it was in the framing. The implication was clear. "You don't belong here." The room shifted. Some gasped. Some blinked. Even the moderator's hand hovered above his notepad, then dropped. Jasmine didn't move. She waited. Let the weight of his words stretch until it bent under its own arrogance. Then she leaned slightly forward. Voice calm. Voice sure. "How does it happen?" A pause. She repeated it like a question she'd heard 100 times in different forms. "It happens when a girl works 3 jobs to pay for a degree nobody believed she'd earn. When she studies past midnight, wakes at dawn, and walks into courtrooms where she's expected to lose, but doesn't. It happens when a woman is called emotional in rooms she outworks. When she walks into halls of power and still shows up, still stands tall." She turned to him now, not with anger, but precision. "I didn't inherit a platform, Mr. Trump. I earned it." No applause. Just a low hum of recognition in the back rows. Barron's smile faltered, just for a moment. His hand moved toward his note stack, but stopped. A flashcard had slid across a polished oak table that morning. "Hairdresser to house floor," underlined twice. "That's your opener. Matter of fact. Surprise her. Frame her story as luck, not merit. Blur the line between passion and instability. If she bites, you win. Stay cool. Smile. You're the grown-up." He nodded. Got it. He stayed on script. But Jasmine wasn't playing his game. Still, he doubled down. "Look, I respect the Congresswoman's story. But policy isn't about who struggled more. It's about measurable outcomes. Results. Leadership isn't about emotion. It's about effectiveness." He gestured as graphs and figures flashed behind him. "Under your watch, dropout rates in your district are up 4.6%. Budget gaps are widening. You voted against 3 bipartisan funding bills in the last 12 months. That's not leadership." He raised his chin, delivered the final line with surgical pause. "That's obstruction." The jab had landed, or so he thought. The silence that followed was heavier. Not with shock, with disappointment. "You're right, Mr. Trump. Results matter." Her voice didn't rise. It dropped, low, unshaken. "Last month I visited a school where teachers buy pencils with their paychecks. Not iPads, not apps, pencils. I met a grandmother raising 3 kids alone after her daughter died from a treatable infection, because the clinic down the street shut down." She stepped forward, not toward him, but the crowd. "When you quote statistics, I'm not impressed. I know their names. I know their stories. I don't need graphs to understand." She turned back, steady. "You call that emotion? I call it representation." The crowd shifted again. No clapping, Just clarity. Barron fidgeted, his polished rhythm thrown. Jasmine wasn't defending herself. She was leading. And the room? It was following. Barron straightened behind his podium, reclaiming posture like armor. The flicker in his expression had vanished, replaced by a polished confidence he could summon at will. He raised a printed sheet and began again. You speak passionately, Congresswoman. But passion doesn't erase voting records. You voted against House Resolution 214, which would have increased education funding for underperforming districts. You stood against opportunity for the very people you claim to represent. The crowd stirred, not with support but curiosity. Jasmine stood silent. Barron continued. This bill was bipartisan, supported across the aisle, but you said no. How do you explain that? The moment hung. Jasmine raised her hand, calm, clear. Let me stop you there. Her voice wasn't harsh. It was precise. You're quoting half the bill. I co-sponsored the original resolution. The part you're referencing was an amendment, snuck in at the 11th hour. It would have stripped funding from rural schools in my district and funneled it to unregulated charter networks with zero oversight. She took a step forward. What I voted against wasn't education reform. It was predatory policy dressed up as compassion. She didn't pause for applause. She didn't need to. If you'd read the sponsor notes, you'd know I introduced a counter-amendment. Section 4A. It passed. Quietly. But it passed. And it sent money where it was actually needed. To mental health services in underserved schools. The screen behind them shifted. A citation appeared. Section 4A. Crockett Amendment. Barron's expression cracked for a breath. He flipped through his notes. Jasmine stayed steady. I don't need viral moments. I need policy that holds. The crowd leaned forward now. Pens down. Phones up. Barron cleared his throat. With all due respect, we still need to focus on national priorities like tax responsibility and infrastructure efficiency. Jasmine didn't respond. She waited. His words sounded rehearsed, polished but hollow. A closing argument with no courtroom. That's cute, Congresswoman, but people watching aren't interested in emotional appeals. She answered without delay. They're not watching me for emotion. They're watching you for control. Gasps this time. Quiet. Sharp. Barron stepped back. He hadn't expected that. He tried to smile, but it came out flat. He tried to continue, but the audience had shifted again. Their eyes were no longer curious. They were certain. Barron smiled again, quicker now. Congresswoman, let's be honest. There's a difference between leadership and being loud. And I think the public can tell the difference. Jasmine didn't blink. Emotion? He nodded. Yes. Your tone. Your posture. It makes people uncomfortable. You're too aggressive. Too angry. It's not becoming. A beat. You call me emotional when I'm informed, but give men like you credit just for showing up. The silence that followed was full. Not empty, heavy. Even the moderator looked down. When I speak with urgency, I'm angry. When I correct a lie, I'm aggressive. But when a young man with zero experience reads from cue cards, he's confident. She turned to the audience. This isn't just about me. It's about every woman who's had to soften her voice to be heard. Who's been told to smile more, calm down, speak less. She didn't shout. She didn't pace. She stood, firm, honest. I've held the hands of mothers who buried their sons. I've drafted legislation while grieving. I don't get to be calm when I carry that. And I shouldn't have to apologize for it. Not when the only storm you've weathered is bad press. Barron's lips parted. Nothing came out. Jasmine's voice dropped. I want to tell you a story. The crowd listened. Danielle, single mom, 2 kids, cleaning hospital floors at night, studying for a nursing certificate during the day. She was arrested for code violations. Grass too tall. Bench warrant she didn't know existed. She had her children in the car. I met her in a cold courtroom hallway. She thought she'd lose her kids over a lawn. Because she was working 2 jobs. We fought. We won. But I'll never forget what she said to me. I didn't need a savior. I needed someone in the room who saw me. Jasmine looked out, not as a politician. As a witness. That's why I'm here. Not for applause. For the people outside rooms like this. Barron still hadn't spoken. His hands rested on the podium now. Fingers loosened. Jasmine had taken the room. Not with volume, with truth. The silence after Jasmine's words wasn't stillness, it was transformation. No applause broke it. No one dared. Barron stood there, unsure whether to respond or retreat. His team, off stage, whispered furiously into headsets, but he couldn't hear them. He reached beneath the podium and pulled out a thick bound stack of papers. 400 printed pages clipped together. A visual play. A statement of weight. This, he said, is the proposed federal infrastructure expansion package. A bill the Congresswoman not only supported but endorsed. In Section 17B, page 412, $230 million in federal development grants are reallocated away from vulnerable communities to industrial zones. The document hit the podium with a thud. Cameras zoomed. Journalists perked up. Are you endorsing policy that diverts resources from the very people you claim to protect? He paused, savoring the silence, the image of the heavy stack. He thought he had her cornered. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't look at the paper. She looked at the crowd. Would you mind displaying page 412, section 17B? The tech team complied. A few keystrokes later, the massive screen behind them lit up with the exact text. She walked to the center of the stage. Calm, measured. This is the clause. It does say what Mr. Trump claims, on the surface. But look here. Footnote C. She pointed to the bottom corner. The screen zoomed in. It's conditional. These reallocations occur only during declared emergency surplus years. And once unmet infrastructure needs are certified by FEMA, the funds revert. She turned to the audience. You didn't read it. She turned back to Barron. I wrote it. Gasps now. Audible. Not dramatics. Just truth dropping like stone in water. Barron's jaw tensed. His fingers flipped through pages. Looking for anything. An escape. A counterpunch. She wasn't finished. I also introduced the amendment requiring quarterly reporting on all reallocations, publicly posted. It passed oversight 3 weeks ago. She returned to her podium. The glow of the screen still behind her. So no, I didn't overlook this clause. I strengthened it. The audience murmured. Some clapped once, then twice. Then the back rows joined. Not wild, just rising. She hadn't defended. She had dismantled. Not with anger. With authorship. Barron hadn't just lost the point. He had lost the frame. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. You twist everything, he said. This whole thing is performance art. You want to go viral. His voice cracked. Not volume-wise, tone. Like something inside him had slipped. Jasmine didn't move. Didn't blink. No, I'm not running for viral. I'm running for truth. You walked into it. The audience didn't erupt. They exhaled. Barron stood, frozen. Posture intact. Presence shattered. Jasmine stepped forward. We talk a lot about leadership. But no one asks what it feels like to be invisible in your own country. Her voice stayed steady. I've knocked on doors where the paint is peeling and no one answers, not because they don't care about politics, but because they're working double shifts or trying to keep the lights on. I've sat with grandmothers rationing insulin. I've held the hands of mothers who couldn't afford headstones for their sons. They don't ask what party I'm with. They ask if I'll show up again. I'm not perfect. I haven't always played politics right. But I've never stopped listening. And I've never stopped showing up for the people told they don't belong in rooms like this. A single word rose from the crowd. Amen. She didn't smile. She didn't thank them. She let it rest. I'm not here to trade barbs. I'm here because voices like mine, and voices like yours, belong in every room where decisions are made. Not just the rooms we're invited into. All of them. No one clapped. They just looked, and listened, and remembered. Barron hadn't moved. He was still in frame, but no longer in focus. The moderator tried to reclaim control. He leaned into the mic, thanked the guests, and announced the close of the forum. But no one moved. Not the audience, not the panel, not the cameras. Everyone sat in stillness, like interrupting it would unravel something sacred. Jasmine stood slowly, not for drama but for duty. She walked toward the center of the stage, toward the camera feeding directly to the livestream. She didn't adjust her mic. She didn't clear her throat. She simply looked into the lens and began. If you're watching this, maybe you're tired. Tired of being interrupted when you speak. Tired of being told to calm down. Tired of working twice as hard for half the credit. Her voice didn't waver. It softened. Tired of watching power dress itself up in polish and call it character. Tired of seeing people who look like you, sound like you, live like you, left out of every room where the future is decided. No anger, just truth. And if you're tired of being silenced, then speak. Even if your voice shakes. If you're tired of being doubted, then show up. Even if the door wasn't open for you. She leaned forward slightly, not for effect, but for connection. If you're tired of watching truth get twisted, then don't argue about it. Be it, live it, say it again and again. She smiled, barely, but it caught the light. Because truth still matters. She stepped back, not in retreat, in respect. The audience stood, one by one, then all at once. No one clapped. They just stood, like they'd witnessed something they didn't want to break. Jasmine didn't bask in it. She didn't bow. She simply turned and walked off stage. Baron remained seated, rigid, his script undone, his notes irrelevant. He had arrived prepared to perform. She had come to reveal. And now, the crowd was no longer with him. They were with her. Somewhere, a student posted a clip. She didn't need the stage. She was the message. Within minutes, the speech was trending. Hashtags flooded the feeds. Edits. Reaction videos. Transcripts. Not because it was viral. Because it was vital. In the control room, a producer whispered, "We just filmed history." No slogan. No applause line. Just the sound of a woman who had been underestimated in every room she'd ever entered, finally heard. And in that moment, millions understood something they hadn't before. This wasn't about winning a debate. It was about reminding the country what leadership really looks like. Earned, lived, unshaken. Jasmine Crockett didn't just end the conversation. She changed it, forever.